At the same time, as it is rhetorically pushing peace talks, right? Supposedly trying to force the two sides, Russia and the Kiev regime in Ukraine, to sit down and agree to a ceasefire and eventually a supposedly a diplomatic settlement of the conflict. Of course, this is just a pretense, right? The U.S. is not a third party arbiter. They're not some, unconnected to this. This is actually their conflict, right? The U.S. Secretary of State, Mark Rubio, has openly admitted, right, in front of the media, that this conflict is a U.S. proxy war on Russia via Ukraine. Like, flat out, openly admitted it. I mean, not that there was any question, but even they admit it. So this idea that they can somehow play third party mediator or arbiter and bring the two warring sides together, this is a pose. This is a pretense that Russia is thus far, for the most part, going along with, if they as long as they think it continues possibly to be their benefit, right, as they seek to manipulate, maneuver Trump in some type of direction that is more favorable to Russia. They're playing off the fact that it's quite clear Trump hates Zelensky, right? He has contempt for him. He hates and has contempt for the European political elite. He doesn't really care about Ukraine or NATO for that matter. But he is still the U.S. president, and there is a huge institutional pressure on him to save this regime, this U.S. proxy regime in Kiev, to maintain an anti-Russian Ukrainian proxy state. So he has not been able to, if it's true that he ever wanted to, walk away from this conflict. And he may have been told, in fact, almost certainly he has been told by many of the neocons that surround him that he should escalate to de-escalate, that he has to put pressure on Russia in order for them to agree to a freezing or an end to the conflict, not on Russian terms, but on American terms. And Russia is not agreeing to that at all. Hence, I believe this was part of a pressure campaign. If you will remember, just a week, not even a full week before the attack, Donald Trump tweeted out that if it wasn't for him, something very, very bad would happen to Russia, which is essentially a mafia-style threat, right? It is a threat. If you don't do what I want, I will break your leg and burn down your cousin's house, right? This is what Donald Trump was saying. This is his art of the deal, right? He goes to Iran. If you don't agree to my deal, I'll bomb you back into the Stone Age, right? I mean, that's the way he does, quote, diplomacy. And I believe this was part of the same tactic. I do not believe that there's any way that U.S. intelligence could not have known about this, right? The CIA bragged in a big headline article in the New York Times how after the U.S. backed Maidan Putsch in 2014, they came into Ukraine and they completely took over the Kiev regime's intelligence agencies and rebuilt them from the ground up in their own image and under their control. So the Kiev regime's intelligence agency, the SBU that carried this Operation Spiderweb out, are we supposed to believe that somehow the CIA, which evidently has an entire floor for its purposes, in the Kiev regime's SBU, their intelligence building, MI6 also evidently has a floor as well. All right. And, they have it under complete control, but somehow they just didn't know about this. Of course, they knew about this. In fact, they were actively involved in planning, and their ISR, their satellite reconnaissance information was absolutely essential into carrying that out. The Russia knows this, right? They know this. They know Trump is lying. They understand all of this, and we've heard from below the presidential level, but from ambassadors and deputy foreign ministers and the like that point fingers directly at the United Kingdom and the United States for this. This is a huge deal. This is part of Russia's nuclear triad that has been attacked. Their ability to respond to nuclear attacks, right, or to deter nuclear attacks by the United States and the UK, which is also a nuclear power. Now, just a year ago, May 27th of last year, there was a previous attack on a Russian strategic asset. There was actually two instances involving Russia's early warning radars, right? The radars whose job is to detect incoming ballistic, i.e. nuclear attacks. And after that attack occurred, right, again, ostensibly by the Kiev regime with drones and missiles, but after that attack occurred, Russia changed their nuclear use doctrine. And one of the ways that they changed it, most relevant to this, was they said that if there is an attack by a third-party state, i.e., in this case, Ukraine, on Russia, a significant attack, particularly one that involves an attack on Russia's nuclear asset, their strategic assets. If in making this attack, they are assisted in any demonstrable way by another country, a third party, that is a nuclear state, then Russia will regard that as an attack by that nuclear state, in this case, the United States and the United Kingdom. And that right there is a green light. Russia's new nuclear use doctrine is available. They, according to their own nuclear doctrine, they have the right to choose to respond to the U.S., in this instance, with a nuclear weapon. Now, I don't believe they're going to do that. I don't think it would be in their interest to do that now. But there will certainly be people within the Russian military and the Kremlin telling Putin that if you don't use at least a demonstrable or a demonstrative use of a nuclear weapon, tactical nuclear weapon in some far off place, right? If you don't at least do that, then we've just had our red lines violated, and our own newly revamped nuclear use doctrine has just been stepped all over and proven to be toothless. That's a big deal. So Russia, Putin has a decision to make. Russia is winning on the battlefield. It is winning decisively on the battlefield. It is winning in the war of industrial production. It is winning the economic war that has been waged on Russia with some 28,000 individual sanctions on Russia, Russian companies, Russian people, Russian entities, and the attempt to cut Russia off from global markets and the global financial infrastructure, kipping off of SWIFT and everything else. Russia's winning that. Their economy is growing, right, and has been growing at a faster clip, a significantly faster clip than the Europeans, who have significant blowback from their own sanctions on Russia, particularly on energy, and faster even than their Russian economy is growing faster than the United States. Why would they seek to respond to an obvious provocation in a way that might threaten the current course of events? They're winning the war on the battlefield. They're winning the military-industrial war, which is so essential to a war of attrition, and they're winning in economic terms, at least relatively, considering what they are up against here. They don't want to change the course dramatically that would upset that trajectory. At the other hand, they have to respond in an extremely significant way for deterrence value. Um, Now, Russia has on Thursday evening, and there was the attacks continued on Friday evening. On Thursday evening, Russia launched a significant long-range strike that involved more than 400 drones, mostly of the Garan long-range strike type, as well as some 45 missiles, including some ballistic missiles, some Iskanders, and some KH-101s, obviously not affecting Russia's ability to fire these cruise missiles with the Tupolev 95, whatever damage was really done to their air bases. Now, these were significant strikes, and one of the things that they revealed is that the Kiev regime has, in most places, non-existent air defense. And where they did have air defense, like in Kiev, it was completely ineffective. And Russia's Iskander was actually targeted by a Patriot system, evaded that Patriot system through countermeasures and evasion. There's a clear video showing a Patriot system firing 4 interceptors trying to stop the incoming missiles, failing, and then the interceptors impacting on the Patriot launch site. So, like I said, the Kiev regime's air defense is either non-existent or completely ineffective. However, that was not Russia's response to this attack. However, it's arguable about how effective it was or wasn't. It was pulled off. It was an embarrassment, and it was an attack on a nuclear superpower's elements of its nuclear triad. That cannot go without retribution, if only for deterrence purposes. I believe that Russia is now carefully planning out their response. It will be carefully calibrated. It will not target civilians. It almost certainly will probably not target the US or the United Kingdom or other European countries. It's simply not in Russia's interests, diplomatic or otherwise, to do so right now. They have weathered this like they've weathered, ATACMS strikes, Storm Shadow strikes, Scalp strikes, things that, Western weapons that Western military personnel were actively involved in firing into Russia. But there has to be a statement made, right? Both, for the enemy, but also for Russia's own people. And I believe that it will probably be the largest single long-range strike, mostly missile strike, right, that has occurred during the last 3 years. And I also think that it is very likely that it will include the use of the Oreshnik, which has gone into mass production in the last half a year. And we don't know exactly how many have been produced, but I'm pretty sure they've got at least a few available for exactly, a situation like this where Russia needs to respond in an extremely demonstrative and forcible way. So I think we're going to see that, right? It could happen this weekend. It could. I think that's still kind of early timing, but it's not impossible, right? By the time you're watching this, you may be hearing something about it. I don't know. But I think we'll see something definitely within 2 weeks' time. I would guess that. And it will not be was that a retribution? No, it will be perfectly obvious. It will be big. It will be demonstrative. And I believe it will be effective. It will be a lot more effective than the Kiev regime's Operation Spiderweb was at the end of the day. Now, again, there is a certain amount of intelligence credit that was due, for pulling off an asymmetric attack like this. And in fact, the Washington Post had an article just this week that the Kiev regime, that the dirty war in Ukraine has just begun. I don't think it's actually just begun, but it's certainly kicking into a higher gear. As things go worse and start snowballing even faster, on the battlefield against the Kiev regime, they will more and more, both the Kiev regime and its Western backers, turn to, you can call them asymmetric warfare, you can call it unconventional warfare, you can call it dirty tricks of all types and forms, right? We've already seen lots of assassinations, bombings, terrorist attacks. We're likely to see something involving chemical weapons or biological weapons that would be blamed on Russia. There's the possibility for some type of dirty bomb nuclear attack. We will see more and more and more of such asymmetric strikes out of desperation, mostly, as Russia continues to substantially clock the Kiev regime on the battlefield. It's not a question. It's openly admitted by both sides now. And it's just something that Russia's going to have to weather, right? It's a war. It's a conflict. It's a war not only against the U.S. proxy regime that they installed in Ukraine, but against the entirety of NATO and even the collective West. So they're going to get their licks in, right? It's still going to be a long, bloody slog till this is over. One thing I can say for certain is that there was never a chance of this Istanbul diplomatic process to ever achieve anything. But if you ever thought that there was, then there certainly isn't any chance of it now. It is back to the battlefield. And even some of Trump's mostly illiterate, screaming at all capital levels, childish Twitter or truth social diplomacy, involving all of this, he has seemed to acknowledge that he is not going to be able to end this anytime soon, and not on American terms. And so that's why he increasingly make, this kind of frustrated noise about walking away, even as the U.S. is quietly behind such asymmetric warfare attacks in an attempt to put pressure on Russia.